Underneath the artillery, Havermail and Staff Sergeant Jerry W. Jones heard tracks and heavy engines moving east. The sound was unmistakable now. Tank engines, multiple, closing. Bravo Company loaded heat, high-explosive anti-tank rounds, the only thing in the ammunition rack designed to kill another tank. The crews swung the infrared searchlights and starlight scopes onto the western tree line and waited. Then an anti-tank mine exploded somewhere between 800 and 1100 meters southwest of West Hill. The blast set a PT-76 on fire. The burning tank illuminated 3 other vehicles immediately behind it, 2 more PT-76s and a BTR-50 armored personnel carrier. The disabled tank fired its first round at the camp before the echo of the mine had faded. The round fell short. 7 more muzzle flashes opened up behind it. Specialist 4 Frank Hembry fired the first American round. He had nothing but the muzzle flashes to aim at. His second shot hit and destroyed an enemy vehicle. A CIDG patrol on the western approach radioed that they were watching a column of 8 to 15 vehicles moving east from the border. Captain Stovall called the camp's mortar section for illumination. The flares went up. They lit the NVA tanks. They also lit the American positions on West Hill. Stovall ran from his bunker to the filing line. He was climbing onto the back deck of Havermail's M48 when a PT-76 round hit the loader's hatch. The blast threw Stovall 10 feet behind the tank. It threw Havermail clear of the commander's cupola. Both men were sprayed with shrapnel. The driver, who had dismounted to man the externally mounted machine gun, was killed. So was the loader, who had been at the breach inside the turret when the round struck. 2 Americans, dead in less than a second. The M48 was lightly damaged. The 90mm gun, the fire control optics, and the engine were intact. A replacement crew climbed aboard within minutes. The Patton was back in the fight before the next illumination flare burned out. Jones took charge of the platoon. He dismounted his own tank, ran across the hill under fire, and reached a Patton that could not engage the main enemy column from where it sat. He directed the driver to a new firing slot. The tank's gunner, Specialist 4 Eddie Davis, sighted on the muzzle flashes near the burning lead PT-76 and put a 90mm round into another vehicle in the column. That made 2 PT-76s destroyed on the western approach. A third was visible, immobile. The BTR-50 was burning behind them. The Americans began to run out of heat and switched to high explosive. HE was less effective against armor, but still capable of disabling a thin-skinned PT-76. By the time the Bravo Company had shifted ammunition, the North Vietnamese armor was already pulling back into the jungle. An AC-47 Spooky gunship arrived overhead and worked the retreating column with its 3 side-mounted miniguns. Each minigun fired 6,000 rounds a minute. The retreating infantry crossed the open ground in the dark with the hulls of their tanks burning behind them. The infantry battalion of the 66th Regiment, which had been moving up to exploit the breach the armor was supposed to create, never reached the wire. The tank engagement, from the mine detonation to the AC-47 working the retreat, had lasted less than half an hour. At first light, a CIDG patrol moved out to the burning hulks on the western approach. They counted 3 vehicles destroyed, 2 PT-76s, 1 BTR-50 PK. There were no bodies. The North Vietnamese had recovered their dead and their wounded in the retreat. What they left behind was the equipment that would not move on its own. Bloody bandages, burned clothing, a driver's helmet, an LPO-50 backpack flamethrower. The flamethrower told its own story. The 202nd expected to use it on bunkers it never reached. American casualties were 2 killed and 2 wounded. The dead were the driver and loader of Havermail's tank. Stovall and Havermail survived their wounds. South Vietnamese casualties were 1 CIDG killed and 4 wounded. The damaged M48A3 was repaired and back in service within days. The 16th Company, 4th Battalion, 202nd Armored Regiment committed roughly 10 PT-76s and an unknown number of BTR-50s to the assault. It lost a third of its committed armor in under 30 minutes. It did not destroy the 175 guns. The wire held. The infantry battalion behind the armor never reached it. The 69th Armor Regiment's later history put the assessment plainly. The enemy had been obviously surprised by the presence of the U.S. tanks. Hanoi had not known the M48s were at Ben Het. The 202nd crews had trained to overrun a fortified camp and silence a heavy gun line. They had not been briefed for what they ran into. They had been told there were Green Berets and Montagnards and artillery. They had not been told there were Pattons. The mine that lit the first PT-76 also lit the matchup. After Ben Het, the People's Army held its armor back from direct contact with American units. The tanks were saved for ARVN positions and for the conventional offensive of 1972, when the Americans were largely gone. The siege did not end with the tank battle. The 28th and 66th Regiments came back in May and June with infantry. B-52 strikes pounded the jungle around the camp. A captured POV soldier later told American interrogators that the 28th Regiment had entered the battle area with more than 1,000 men and pulled out with 200. The rest had been worked over by the bombers. Captain Gerald Cossey, who was there, wrote up the engagement for Armor magazine in 1970. He titled the article, "Tank versus Tank." 3 years later, in May 1972, North Vietnamese armor came back to Ben Het with T-54s. The Americans were gone by then, and ARVN Rangers held the camp. The Rangers destroyed the first 3 PT-76s with Tau missiles. The lesson of March 3, 1969, that PT-76s should not fight what could destroy them, became permanent doctrine on the other side, too. Ben Het is jungle now. The hulks of the PT-76s were photographed where they burned and left there. There is no memorial.
March 3, 1969. Ben Het Special Forces Camp, Western Kontum Province. The shelling started at 2100 and did not stop for hours. By dawn, the camp would absorb roughly 650 rounds. Inside the wire, 12 Green Berets, 400 Montagnard irregulars, 2 M42 Duster anti-aircraft guns, a 175mm artillery battery, and 4 M48 Patton tanks. Moving east out of the Cambodian dark, an infantry battalion of the People's Army 66th Regiment, 10 PT-76 light tanks of the 202nd Armored Regiment, and BTR-50 armored personnel carriers behind them. Hanoi wanted the camp's 175mm guns silenced. The howitzers ranged deep into Cambodia and across the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The North Vietnamese tank crews did not know there were Pattons on the hill. Ben Het sat 13 kilometers from where Laos, Cambodia, and South Vietnam met, on a barren rise 15 kilometers northwest of Dak To. The 5th Special Forces Team had established a detachment there in the early 60s to watch the trail. By 1969, it was an airstrip, a wire perimeter, 3 CIDG companies and their Green Beret advisors of Operational Detachment Alpha 244, an American 175mm artillery battery, 2 Dusters, and roughly 1,200 Allied personnel in total. About 440 Montagnard irregulars, 511 ARVN, 207 artillerymen, 25 American advisors. The M107 self-propelled guns at Ben Het were heavy U.S. tube artillery and reached the border bases Hanoi was using to stage everything moving south. Silence the guns and the trail could breathe. Convoys staged across the border were within reach. The 4th Infantry Division was responsible for the area. The 1st Battalion of the 69th Armored Regiment was the 4th's armor. By early 1969, the People's Army had moved the 28th and 66th Infantry Regiments into the tri-border base areas along with the 4th Battalion of the 202nd Armored Regiment, a unit which had never engaged American forces in a stand-up fight. American intelligence had been tracking armor signatures moving overland through Cambodia for weeks. Most of the line officers did not believe it. North Vietnamese armor had appeared in country once before, in February 1968, when PT-76s overran the Special Forces Camp at Lang Vei near the DMZ. That had been 12 months earlier and 400 kilometers north. No one in the Central Highlands expected a repeat. The 4th ID ordered Company B, 1st of the 69th Armor, based near the Dak To airstrip and commanded by Captain John P. Stovall, to reinforce Ben Het. Stovall sent his 1st platoon forward, 4 M48A3 Pattons. 3 he placed in dug-in positions on West Hill, facing the valley through which Highway 512 ran in from the border. The 4th he sighted at the airstrip, covering the resupply route. The tanks were heavy, 50 tons each, built in Detroit for a war against Soviet armor in Central Europe, and never used it. The 90mm main gun had been designed to kill T-55s. The turret front was 110mm of cast steel. The PT-76 weighed 14 tons, carried a 76mm gun, and had 14mm of front armor. The M107A3 also carried a diesel engine, infrared searchlights above the cupolas, and starlight scopes for the gunners. It was equipment built for a different war than the one it was being sent to. The two vehicles had been built for different wars on opposite ends of the earth. The Patton was built to fight the Red Army on the North German plain. The PT-76 was built to ferry infantry across rivers and support them with a light gun once they got to the other side. In late February and the first days of March, the Special Forces team laid anti-tank mines on the roads to the west. The camp continued to take harassing fire. Bravo Company took 10 casualties from shelling. The 175mm guns kept firing into Cambodia. On the night of March 2nd, around 2200, Platoon Sergeant Hugh Havermale woke Captain Stovall to tell him his men could hear vehicles in the jungle to the west. Stovall went forward with him and scanned the tree line with a night vision device. He saw nothing. The engines ran for about 20 minutes and shut down. He noted it and did not pass it up the chain. There was no procedure for it. The 1st and 2nd of March were almost quiet. The 3rd was not. The recoilless rifle fire began at 2100. Mortars and artillery came in at 2330. The barrage was heavier than anything the camp had absorbed in February. The rounds came in at a rate that suggested a final preparation.